co-chair today.
All right, so it is Wednesday, March 20th, just after noon, and I will call to order today's meeting of the C4 Toll Strategy Subcommittee. It's good to see you all. I know it's been a while since I've been able to join. It's been busy with legislative session, and so even though I haven't been able to make it to the last couple of these meetings, I can assure you there have been no shortage of tolling discussions going on regardless. And I also want to point out, I realized the reason why I was gone from our last C4 meeting, Commissioner Savas, regular C4, was because that was actually our last day of session. We were going late.
That's
We
right.
went till about 9 p.m. Instead of waiting to go till Friday. So it was nice to get that over with a little bit early. And we had a nice trip at the National League of Cities conference where a few of us we were there and all together when we heard the news that we're going to be discussing today. So with that, I know we're going to start off with a discussion about the DHM research tolling survey and poll that was led by Mayor Bialystowski from West Lynn. And I know there were several of us cities and organizations who chipped into making this happen. So Mayor, if you want to give a quick introduction, that would be great.
Sorry, I got disconnected there for a second. Were you talking to me, Adam?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the poll was something that I thought was a good idea because nobody had ever gauged statistically, in a statistically valid way, public support for tolling and transportation issues. It came about after ODOT's RMPP survey, where it kind of just asked, do you want tolling this way or that way? But didn't let people share their actual feelings about it. So we but wanted to make sure it was statistically valid. So we used DHM, several cities, the Hamlet, and a labor organization banded together, and we crafted the questions with DHM in a non-biased way to make sure it was valid. And I'm proud of the work we did. And if you look at a lot of the coverage of the governor's pause, or I don't know what to call it really, but when you look at the work that the governor did, uh, a lot of the news coverage talks about the poll. So I think it was good to have just for so folks know, legislators know, hey, for example, 91% of Clackamas County voters are opposed to this, and it's similar across the spectrum. So anyway, I'll close there. I'm just driving home from a meeting, so sorry to be in transit.
No
And you
worries.
can make any comments, Adam, if you have any, because you partook in some of the meetings.
Yeah, well, I will. We were able to go over a quick overview with the team a couple of weeks ago, but I see that John is here, so I will just let him go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Is it all right if I share my screen?
Yes.
Someone give me the thumbs up. You see, oh, there we go. I think it's working. All right. We'll get this organized here. All right. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being able to work with the cities of Westwood, Tualatin, Wilsonville, the Stafford Hamlet, as well as United Food and Commercial Workers on this.
And Oregon City.
And Oregon City, that's right. I'm sorry, that's not on here. I need to get that added. I will get that updated. My apologies. As I've worked with most of your communities, I think all of your communities, on other projects as well. But just quickly, I'm John Horvick, the Senior Vice President at DHM Research. We're an independent, nonpartisan public opinion and policy firm. We're pollsters. We were out there asking people what sort of communities they want to live in this case, regards to tolling. I'm going to go through some of the kind of big picture stuff in this deck. Some of the communities I've given a presentation to have some more details in terms of the demographic differences, but for the key here is kind of the high level stuff. What we did is we wanted to gauge public opinion about congestion and road quality in the Portland metro region. So in addition to tolling, we did ask some other questions too, about quality, about congestion. We asked about tolling in different ways, kind of generically about the specific projects. We gave people information about what might be done pro and con, and then asked them again. So we got several chances to check in. And then as well as we engaged interest in alternatives for transportation funding. So if not tolling, is there something else? Now, there's not a deep dive on those, but we have a little bit of insight into what maybe is attractive, but also perhaps some yellow lights about what's not attractive moving forward. If there's going to be funding, it's going to be difficult to find something to get a majority, although the clearly was not a majority for tolling. Just the methods, I'll just dispense with this quickly. This is a survey of 600 Metro Region voters in Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas counties. So on this side of the river, it is proportional to those community sizes. So most of the completes are going to be in Multnomah County just by its size, and then proportional for Washington. And Clackamas kind of give you some of those numbers here in a second. It took about 14 minutes to complete. It was a pretty robust survey. It's representative of all the key characteristics that we would expect. So age, race, gender, education, political party, income, all those things. We want to make sure we had a good representative sample. Margin of error 4.0% for the overall sample. If there's questions about methodology, I'm happy to discuss them, but that's a pretty standard approach, but also a very high quality approach. We invested resources to do a good sample size using good tools, ensuring they have a good representative sample. So it's going to be accurate, but also credible to your stakeholders. And I think it proved to be. So just, some of the demographics, again, and I'm not going to go over all the numbers here, but just to show you, we had a good distribution of the community, whether it's by age, gender, party, race, geography, income, education, all those characteristics we heard from not only a diverse group of people, but representative of the three-county region. Just a little bit more about the sample, but this is sort of like thinking about how this connects to the issue at hand too. 86% of folks say that they own or lease a vehicle. So not a huge surprise, right? We know most people do. I would put a number around that. And this is both for our sake to know. It's also just to remind people who are going to interpret this data, hey, this is an issue that affects just about everybody in the community. Of course, it affects those who don't own or lease a vehicle because they have to still get around. But for drivers, that's pretty much everybody. There are going to be some times in deck here where we're going to focus on showing some numbers from people who live in proximity to I-5 and I-205. There are different ways to do it. This was sort of a clean way to do it. Those who live sort of I-205 alone, those are people who live in zip codes that the I-205 travels through, similar for I-205. And then we have we're going to be sometimes in the presentation where we say combined. So if it's I-205 alone, those are people who live on 205. I-5 alone, those people who live on I-205, and the combined is those people who live on either 205 or I-5. But about 37% of people live sort of in zip codes adjacent to the interstates. So big chunk of folks. About 58% of people in the region say that they drive an I-5 or I-205 at least a few times a week. So a majority of people are taking these roads. It is not, it's definitely not a small segment of the community. Nearly 1 in 4 are taking those roads on a daily basis, 22%. Why are people taking those roads? So we asked, is it to or from work? That's 28%. Or is it mostly for other reasons? That's 57%. And then 16% say, it's about the same for work and for other reasons. So work's a big chunk, although people are definitely taking the I-5, I-205 for other reasons as well. In fact, a majority of folks are taking it for other reasons. Give us a sense of who these folks on the roads are. Among those who do drive on I-5 and I-205 at least a few times a week or more, Clackamas County stands out. And Clackamas County, you're going to see in the data, stands out across sort of the questions we asked, but they're taken at most. Now, that makes sense, right? The I-205 goes right through it. Washington County being the lowest makes sense because the roads are furthest away. And those who do take these roads mostly for work are the ones who are using it the most. So fewer people use them mostly for work, but those who use it for work are using it on the most regular basis, which again makes sense, but we can sort of put some numbers around that as well. All right, so that's sort of big picture. That's who we talk to. That's who's using the roads. That's who's driving. And now we're going to get to some attitudes. And so these next two questions really do validate the need for high quality roads and for funding to address transportation. So we asked two questions at the beginning of the survey, towards the beginning of the survey, if they're concerned or not, first about the quality of major roads and highways in the Portland Metro region. Now, this was at the top of the survey. We weren't giving away what the survey was about at this point, so we did not indicate I-5 and I-205. So you would have some spillover to other major roads and highways in the region, but 74% are concerned about the quality, including 38% who are very concerned. This validates for folks, hey, people want to have roads, maybe they're not thinking that they're great, would like to make some improvements to what we have. And 81% are concerned about congestion, including 40% who are very concerned. And so if you're ODOT, if you're a tolling advocate, you might look at these numbers and say, hey, tolling is it's a tool that's meant to address congestion. And so this aligns with what people's concerns are. Of course, there's other ways to address congestion as well. But this does sort of confirm, hey, folks are viewing the roads as a problem, they're viewing congestion as a problem, and perhaps they'd like to see something done about it. Now we get to tolling. So the first time we asked about tolling was a general conceptual question. We did not ask about RMPP first or the I-5 Abernathy Bridge plan. It was just, hey, tolling might be happening in the region. A little bit of explanation for why, including that gas taxes aren't sufficient to sort of meet the needs. And then, heck, do you support or oppose tolling in the region? 76% oppose, 63% strongly oppose. It's actually very difficult to get numbers like this. It's hard to find an issue that's being discussed at high levels that have this level of opposition. Not only the 3 out of 4 opposed, but that strong opposition, 63%. You could look at the other way too. Only 8% of voters in the region strongly support tolls. This is not something that the people are looking for. Who opposes the most? Here we get that 91% number that was mentioned earlier. Opposition is highest in Clackamas County. It's lowest in Multnomah County. Now, to say it's lowest in Multnomah County, you could overinterpret those words because 69% of those in Multnomah County oppose tolls, right? Tolling is more opposed among lower incomes. And we're going to see that is a primary reason that people are in opposition, concerns about the effects on low-income drivers. And then, we, of course, always look at party. Party shapes people's opinions a lot. And of course, party influences how decisions are made in Salem. Again, you could say that Republicans and non-affiliated voters are the most opposed, but the other way, probably the more accurate way to look at this, considering the politics of the region, is that 7 out of 10 Democrats oppose. Right? So depth is quite broad, and across parties, across incomes, and across geography. There's places where it stands out as opposition is even greater, but it's opposed across the board. Just a couple other numbers similarly. Those who live closest or adjacent or in those zip codes that I-205 runs through, they're more opposed in some other areas, and those who drive on I-5 and 205 more frequently are more opposed than those who don't. Although 70% of those who aren't driving on the roads very frequently also are in opposition. So again, just the point that there are some groups where opposition is higher, but the real takeaway is that opposition is strong across the board. We did ask open-ended question. If you supported tolls, you could tell us why in your own words. We listened, we read all the comments, we tried to put them into meaningful categories. There's 3 things stand out among those who do support tolls. Now, this is from 117 people, right? So this is of the population, that small group of people who supported tolls. Kind of the 3 reasons where, hey, we need to raise revenue. Either it's because we need to raise revenue or direct comments about the gas tax not being sufficient. The next is our roads are in poor quality. We'd like to see improvements. We like to see better infrastructure, expansion of infrastructure, capacity increases. Similarly, 28% said congestion is a problem. This could reduce demand. Okay, so those are the 3 reasons. So those align fairly closely, I think, to what ODOT's saying. But again, this comes from a minority of the people who did support tolling. Among those who oppose tolling, they also had an opportunity to tell us in their own words why. And 41%, a plurality, sort of twice as big as any other category. It's just, darn it, taxes are too high. I feel like I'm paying a lot. I'm paying a lot for transportation in the region right now, and this is something in addition to that. And I just don't think that that is something that I can afford or would be good, or our current funding should be sufficient to meet our needs. And then you see the next is there that 19% says low, it's unfair to low income drivers, and then 16% the next is just not confidence that the funds would be managed well, just distrust in government and system, concerns about oversight and spending. That's future looking. It's also sort of people reflecting on what they're seeing in their current lives now, so distrust that it could be done well. But the big one there is just, hey, we can't afford it. Don't think we should have to pay more. Our taxes right now should be able to accomplish the goals that we have. So then we got into specific ODOT plans. We did ask if they had heard of them. They've heard anything about ODOT's tolling proposals, and about 6 in 10 had. So 39% hadn't, a majority have, 39% haven't. Now, we didn't go into a lot of detail about sort of the depth of information that people might have at 61%. So it could just be like, I read something in the newspaper a long time ago, well, I heard a friend talk about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're well informed about it, but a majority feel like that they've heard something at least about it. Then we did give people descriptions, and we really tried our best to be fair, to take the descriptions that ODOT is using, so that those who, for our sake, for your sake, but also if you're in support of tolling, if you're ODOT, we wanted them to know that we gave people accurate and fair descriptions of what these plans are, because we wanted to have that high credibility for that audience as well. So here we gave people a description of RMPP, then asked them if they support or opposed it, and if that support was strong or just somewhat. And you can see 71% opposed RMPP. Okay. We did the same for the I-205 and Abernathy Bridge toll project, opposition at 64% here. The difference really comes from Multnomah County. Multnomah County voters their opposition was suppressed or lower for this question than it was for this question. I think it's largely they're saying, hey, this is further away from me. I'm not as concerned about it. And so that's where we see the difference. We did also ask a question that said, hey, there's some additional discussions about adding tolls on other major highways in the Portland metro region, including Highway 26 and 217. And here we see that opposition go up to 77%. We see opposition high in Washington County here. We see opposition high in Multnomah County here. So here people now are imagining, well, wait a minute, it's not just about somebody else. It could be my community too. And that's where we see the opposition the greatest. Okay. We did try to give people information on both sides of the issue. And again, we tried to take information that ODOT and advocates for tolling were using, so that they know that we put those best arguments forward. So people had an opportunity to consider those perspectives as they evaluated whether or not they supported or opposed these ideas. I'm not going to go through each one of these individually, and these are sort of shorthand descriptions of the fuller message. But we did say things like, hey, it's fair. Tolls are fair because those who use the roads are paying for them. It ensures that we raise enough money, encourages alternative transportation, discourages people from driving during the busiest times, and helps with traffic flow, things like that. Now you can see that sort of what we asked people whether or not these were good reasons or poor reasons to support tolling. Just in that 30-ish% of folks across the board were telling us that these were good reasons to support tolling. So people start opposed. We gave people reasons that maybe they might be supportive of them or think that they would be a good idea. But largely, they're rejecting them. Then we gave people the other side as well. And by the way, people were randomized. So half the sample heard the support messages first, and half of the sample heard opposition messages first. So if there was an effect on how the order that they heard them, we tried to mitigate that by splitting that up. So here, these are the opposition messages. And you can see just visually here, the, large majorities of people, 73 to 83%, saying that these are good reasons to oppose tolling. The two, if you wanted to squint and say which ones really did the best, it'd be these top two. Again, it's unfair to those who can't shift travel times, income or work or whatever it might be. And then the tolls increase neighborhood congestion as drivers move from the highways to neighborhood streets. Everything here is seen as a good reason to oppose tolling, but those two stood out more than anything else. Interestingly, if we just want to look at how these messages did among those who supported and opposed tolling. So these are the opposition messages. And it's no surprise that those messages were more persuasive among those who opposed tolling, right? Those are those orange dots. But notably, among those who support tolling, a majority found three of these persuasive. Right? Can't shift travel times, increased neighborhood congestion, and also costs for maintaining the road should be shared by the state. All right, so it's not just like this big group of opposition people who were opposed or just saying, yeah, kind of rally around those messages. People who supported tolling also found several of these persuasive. Similarly, for those, so this is for supporters of RMPP. Similarly, for supporters of the Abernathy Bridge Toll Project, majorities found all of these, even among supporters, majorities of supporters of Abernathy found all of these persuasive, and those three especially so. So after we gave people these perspectives, we asked them again, now that you've heard more, consider the different sides. Where are you at now? So for RMPP, support started at 27%, it fell to 21, or to say it the other way around, so opposition started at 71 and it jumped to 77. Okay, so when people heard the different perspectives, including reasons to support, opposition increased. Similarly, for the Abernathy Bridge Toll Project, support fell from 32 to 26. Opposition increased from 64 to 71. Then lastly, we did say there are other ideas for funding our roads and highways. And remember, people are concerned about the quality of the roads. They are concerned about congestion, right? So they're saying that there's a need for something to be done. We asked about these four. Now, these aren't the only four. They could be done in combination. We didn't give people a ton of information about them. But of these four, there was majority support for increasing registration fees for electric vehicles. And there wasn't majority support, in fact, far from it, for anything else. So increasing registration for all vehicles is 36% support. Increasing the gas tax is 33% support. The pay per mile system, just 24% support. So tolling not opposed, but also some of the other key revenue raisers also don't have support. So it does create a challenge moving forward. Also now there's an opportunity to engage policymakers and more discussions about how to move forward. And that's where we ended. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'm also happy to turn things back to you, however you want to use the time. And I'll stop here if I can share again if needed.
Perfect. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thanks, John. Good to see you again. Appreciate the work. I just want to get to the word quality. You use that at the beginning, use it towards the end. And if I heard correctly, correct me. But I think there was inference that it was more than just maybe the condition of the road, that maybe it was capacity or congestion, things that cause congestion. How would you describe that the reaction to the word quality, or the definition of quality as it was posed?
Sure. So we didn't define it for them. So we are sort of making inferences on how they respond. I'll just take, like, I've done a ton of focus groups on transportation in the region over the years. So just some of the things that I'll mention. Potholes, of course, just are the roads smooth is going to be a big part of it. Are there safety is going to be another one. We didn't ask about safety directly, but sort of design of roads and being able to get on and off and transverse safely is going to be part of that quality perspective. things that can disrupt traffic flow that aren't just about the total number of drivers on it will be a quality issue. But a lot of it is going to be, just are the roads smooth? Are my cars, is it being damaged? Is it a bumpy ride? Some of it's going to be safety. Those are the big ones. Quality and congestion touch on each other, but I think congestion, people are primarily thinking about peak times, and some of the quality issues and congestion are going to be like, does something bad happen on the roads that's preventing me from getting to where I need to go?
Yeah. You kind of made another reference in your presentation that I'm curious about, and that was something along the lines of never seen numbers so significant like this. And I know that I've seen some of your polls and always been a great admirer of the work that DHM has done. I know on homeless and some of the big topical items, crime and so forth, I've seen very high numbers there too. So could you give us a sense of not scale, but perspective of the two? And I mean, how strong of a message is this?
Well, it's very, very strong. Just a little bit of context. Like, I'm not sure if this is answering your question directly, but like just some things that are happening out there. If we ask people if things head in the right direction or the wrong track, we're off some of the historic lows from 2020, 2021, but we're still in a really bad spot. If we ask people what are the most important issues in the community, it is homelessness, it's crime, it's cost of living. Those are the three big. Traffic is down considerably from 2019. Now, if we ask people directly about traffic, they'll still say it's a problem. But if we ask people, hey, list the things you're concerned about, roads, traffic, congestion are down quite a bit. Now, part of that is they're being crowded out by other issues, right? Traffic patterns, but traffic patterns are different now. People are experiencing something a little bit different, but it's notable. And from a polling perspective, the only thing I've seen, I mean, I probably could go back to the archives and find something else, right? It's not like there may be other things, but top of mind, the Multnomah County, what was it, the capital gains tax that last go around, like that poll, awful. It's approaching that. The challenge here is we're asking people if they support or oppose something, and it's easier for people to be opposed to something. Now with homelessness, for example, like people dislike homelessness and will tell us homelessness is the problem. That doesn't mean they agree about what the solutions are. And that's part of what I think we're picking up with that last question. Yes, tolling is not something that people like. It's going to be very, very difficult politically. And we certainly see that with the governor's decision, and we see it with the public opinion here. Also, other solutions are going to be maybe not equally challenging, but they're going to be real hard. They're going to be hard. Like, gas taxes aren't going to toll well or poll well either.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Councillor Sherman.
Thank you. Always good work, John. Always appreciate the information. And, I can't say I'm surprised by the results. I think we've talked about this before. 80% plus results. I mean, you could poll on kitties and puppies are cute and you wouldn't get 80%. So, these are pretty strong results. And in the case of a lot of these, strongly opposing something, 2/3 strongly opposing with a 5-tier choices with NA being one of them. That's pretty amazing. Those are pretty strong outcomes. So I think if to force you to go beyond the true interpretation you would normally pull from data like this and to speculate a little bit. So as I look at information like this, and I think you kind of alluded to the fact that it's going to be hard, people don't like revenue. People don't like taxes. They don't like costs of things, especially when they feel like they're already tapped out in a lot of circumstances. And I think the polling on the other revenue choices really demonstrates that. Number one, support is for registration fees to electric vehicles. Can you assume that that's because the majority of people do not own electric vehicles, and that's the low hanging fruit, right? It doesn't impact me, so therefore I'm going to go with that.
There's two issues. I mean,
Okay.
one is the best taxes is the one that somebody else pays. Like, I mean, there's definitely a big element to that. The other is there's a sense, I mean, registration fees for electric vehicles, I think they're, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they're higher than they are for other vehicles. But there's just a sense that among some electric vehicles just aren't paying their fair share. They're using the roads and they're not paying the fuel taxes to pay for them. And so there's a fairness element too. But no doubt, a chunk, I don't know what share of that chunk is, but a chunk of that is, the best taxes is one that somebody else pays.
Well, so then the question that I have kind of related to the informed versus uninformed results, and in all of those circumstances, we got a bump up in opposition after someone went through the process and actually got more information and understood it. But what I thought was intriguing with that is, those that were strongly support, those are pretty static numbers. Those didn't change. They were already kind of entrenched in their opinion. Those that somewhat supported were the ones that moved over, but when they moved over, they didn't move into somewhat opposed, they moved into strongly opposed. Somewhat opposed also seemed pretty static. So I guess my question is, the messaging the results of the messaging, the results of the information seem very powerful. And what I would draw from that information is us or whoever it was being out there sharing information. That's a powerful tool to use if our goal is to move the process in one direction or the other.
Sure.
Is that a reasonable? Okay, I appreciate that.
That's reasonable. And I'd say one, I'm not sure I'd use the word just for I'm not sure I'd use messaging, because we tried to present information the way that ODOT was saying. We weren't trying to persuade in the sense that we do sometimes. I don't think you were suggesting otherwise, but I just feel like I need to say that. But yeah, there were three things. It was those three bits of information I call out because they work so they were so persuasive to those who even started to support it. Yeah, if you were to choose things to highlight in your communications, if you wanted to maintain opposition to tolling, I would focus on those.
No, I appreciate that. And you're right.
No, I hear you.
Messaging isn't the right word. It's information. And it's pretty amazing to me, I'm biased. Obviously, we're all biased because here we are entrenched in this stuff. 4 out of 10 people didn't even know tolling was going to be a thing. Who are these people? Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, hey, John, great work. And Mayor Rory, thanks so much for taking the lead on this. Got a question for Miranda Yamada, who's our CPO chair out here, and I hope I get this right, Randy, but he was kind of curious has ODOT ever done a polling like this, or is it always just their survey that is zero? I mean, very one-sided and earmarked, say, do you want A or B? And I would just kind of, I hope that I got that right, Randy, but he was just kind of curious. And maybe why not?
Those are really questions for ODOT. I couldn't speak for them.
Has anybody ever seen a poll like this and I know that's why we did it, but in anything they've done?
Rick, great question. Last one that we were able to track down was from Metro, related by FM3 pollster related to their transportation bond that they were doing, but that wasn't related to tolling. So this is kind of the first one as far as I can tell. But maybe Commissioner Savas, you've been involved since House Bill 2017. I've been kind of surprised that the governor back then or folks didn't do polling.
You're on mute, sir.
I don't recall a poll that was done as scientific and specific as this. It was, I think, more their internal polling that they had kind of done, which is why you all got involved in that to try to counter that message, whatever that was. And I can't remember the exact details, but no, nothing to this scale.
Right, and it's not as though they needed to because there was no quote unquote election or area where the popular sentiment would actually have changed something, given that it was twice given the go ahead by the legislature. Mayor Milch.
Well, I too am very impressed with the survey, the methodology, your care to not bias people by asking questions in a certain order and all the rest. So I appreciate, and the little deeper dive into it today has been very helpful. Like Councilor Sherman, I'm a little bit surprised that 4 out of 10 didn't seem to even know about it, because we focused so much of our attention on it over the last couple of years that we think everybody's talking about it, and obviously they're not. One other surprise to me was that when you just ask people randomly, why are you opposed, or what are some of the negative things about it, a very small number mentioned concern about traffic and congestion on side streets. You know, this whole diversion issue, which has been, you know, way out front for us as we've talked about it.
Sure.
But once you brought up that issue as a reason why people might shift, it got very high negative remarks. So it's one of those things where when you inform people of the right things and how they are going to affect them individually, even if they're not on the roads, not on the freeways themselves, I think it can be a very convincing argument for people. So it's good that you laid it out in the way you did so that we kind of see where people started and then where they shifted once they'd heard more information. So I apologize that Gladstone did not have the assets to contribute to the funding of this, but I am grateful to all the other communities who did and who made this happen, and Mayor Bialostowski in particular for you know, guiding it through and getting started with a very good approach.
Thank you, Mayor Milch. And I'll just close this out as we prepare for our next agenda item. What we really need to do now as we head into 2025 and the long session as they begin to talk about the next big transportation package is we need to make sure this is in front of as many legislators' faces as possible. One of my concerns initially about getting involved with this was having a pretty good idea what the outcome would be and trying to make sure that this wasn't just us investing in a really expensive press release, but also making sure that it was something that was a good investment that could actually move the needle. And so we need to be making sure that our legislators are aware of this and making sure that our community members are aware of this as well, not as though they aren't, but to make sure that they know that there's some good work going on behind the scenes. So thank you, John. And with that, I am going to move us on to our next agenda item with Mr. Wilson. We have some debriefs on the legislative session and the big news from last week that we can discuss. I will say for me personally, having attended all of those special subcommittee meetings for my day job, it's as though they ended without any fanfare at all, without any real discussions about what's to come next. And so I am interested in hearing what Mr. Wilson has to say. So with that, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Marl, and hello, everybody. Yes, I think that's a fair assessment of how that special subcommittee on transportation planning ended it on a little bit of a fizzle, if you will. But my understanding is that group was tasked and had been tasked with just doing their meetings and then closing down. And so they have reached the end of, I think, what was on their agenda and their planning. They are tasked now with producing some sort of report, which is to be released. We haven't seen it yet. I just checked online. I don't think it's posted yet. And so that's going to be prepared by, I'm not sure who, probably LPRO, the Legislative Planning and Resource Office. And they will just provide a report of what that committee heard. I think it's, you know, if you're in the room, to Commissioner Marl's point, if you would have felt like that last meeting ended with so what? But I think that the work of that committee is really a reaction to the good work that y'all have been doing, which was number one, a year ago to create a committee like that. You know, it led to the governor's pause. It led to the formation of this subcommittee within the legislature to really look under the hood of the toll project. And their work, you know, created something that C4 has been asking for a long time. It's C4, but also each of your communities, which was to have a chance to have public testimony on this conversation around tolling. And so there were 5 public meetings where it was just a show up and talk sort of setting. And obviously many of you participated in several of those or attended several of those and participated in specific ones. That work, kind of similar to the poll you just saw, was very influential to those legislators on that subcommittee. And we started to see a shift in how those legislators on that subcommittee that were outside of Clackamas County begin to reference or talk about tolling. from the September and November meetings, which were very theoretical discussions. And we kind of understand, in 2017, we authorized this, we got to move forward, we have a funding cliff. Then the public meetings happened. And after that, some of those same legislators were much more focused on the details and the nuance and trying to clarify, what are those concerns that they heard? Are they valid? Are they not valid? So I would invite you to not think of that as like a subcommittee that ended with nothing, but as a part of the bigger puzzle that really helped inform the result we saw from the governor last week. I think it's a really big deal, and the work that Representative Hartman and Representative Lewis, two of our Clackamas legislators on that subcommittee, did to make sure that the agenda was as tight as they could make it, move it forward, keep the conversation robust, ask the right questions at the right time, take all of your texts. I'm sure y'all are texting during some of those meetings. I think that was super fruitful. And so don't look on it as like a subcommittee that's ending and then now what, or what was it for? It was part of the broader narrative. It was really well timed. So now what does that mean? Which I think is what we've heard is the shift now is that's done. Moving now towards 2025, the Joint Committee on Transportation will be looking to build a transportation package in the upcoming legislative session. Lots of things to think about here. The sticky notes all over the wall is a good way to think about this. Number one is there's going to be a tour or a road show that the Joint Committee on Transportation does. Will include some or all of the subcommittee or of that committee, including the two co-chairs. There is a draft list of meetings. The first one is actually on March 27th, so it's a week away. It is going to be at the Portland Community College in Sylvania. There's no time that's posted for it yet. It's not, it doesn't have like a show up at 4 o'clock or show up at 8 o'clock. It's on a draft list of meeting dates. What is not on that draft list of meeting dates is a Clackamas County destination. So we have been working to meet with the co-chairs to make sure that there's an opportunity for Clackamas County to speak about the priorities that we have, for an upcoming transportation session or transportation package in the legislative session. More critical now than ever, if you can believe that, because what the governor's letter, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is very clear on is no tolling if you can find a solution in 2025. So, in my opinion, and I think most of you will agree, all the more reason to make sure that there's a chance for Clackamas County to be at the table, to be talking about and be alongside the ideas for what should come forward to help fund the Abernathy Bridge project and beyond. So that's a big deal. Well, we're going to keep working with the co-chairs to make sure that those draft dates become firm, and when they become firm, that Clackamas County or other eastern parts of the metro area are included, because really nothing is east of the Willamette River and what's currently proposed. And what we've heard from at least one of the co-chairs is that the goal is to have some metro area meetings here at the front of the tour, but also at the end. And so it might be that they add Clackamas to like an August or September part of the time frame. And I want you to know too that at Metro, they're talking about this at JPACT is really the forum where some of this is starting, and how to get ready for 2025 and what will be the region's priority within the transportation package. And so this conversation will be happening in a lot of different places. Additionally, to the calculus of this whole conversation is who will be on the transportation committee. And that is to be determined. It's not necessarily going to be the people who were just on it. And there is a new Speaker of the House, it's Julie Fahey. She was appointed at the last couple of minutes of the session as Speaker Rayfield resigned or stepped down from the Speaker role to prepare for his upcoming election campaign. So what we know is that the new Speaker will set up an interim committee for the Joint Committee on Transportation. So they'll set up, who will be on that group. And I think what they'll try to do, what Representative Fahey will try to do, is create a group of legislators to be on that committee, knowing that it's a topic that have a good chance of surviving their election to be ready for 2025, so that there's some transfer of brain energy or institutional knowledge that goes into 2025. Probably people in stronger districts and maybe less in swing districts is maybe how I would think of it if I was in her role, which I'm not. But I know that several of our Clackamas legislators are trying to get on that committee. Have made it very clear and plain that they would like to be on the Joint Committee on Transportation to represent this project that was promised in 2017 is not yet fulfilled. So that's a big deal that we are mindful of. Beyond tolling, and I think that last slide is really one that, you know, we should all print out and put on our bathroom mirror to look at as we brush our teeth, right? Every morning and night is, if not tolling, then what? Because the governor's letter to the OTC was very clear. RMPP ended. Abernathy Bridge delayed. Supposing you can have or find funding in the 2025 session to fund the deficit there. And the governor's office has been clear. It's a $400 million gap that has to come from somewhere. And she's not opposed to revisiting the tolling conversation if the 2025 transportation package doesn't produce a solution. And so that, I think that all the more reason, and that's what I mean by, like, now there's additional work to do to get together and have some ideas that are supportable by our communities to go into 2025 and say, if not tolling, then this or these things. And that's unfair, I think, to put it on the communities to say this is what, you know, we think how the state should fund everything. But we do want to be prepared to be, you know, come to the quilt with a patch is what the phrase I always like to say. Just try to have some ideas, be at the table with ideas that we can be supportive of, that you think your communities will be supportive of. But it's an election year. There's a lot of things that can really go into to the decisions that will be made. So be thinking about all those pieces. And one way that we've staged an opportunity to discuss that is getting ready for the C4 retreat here in June. And so Brian has thoughtfully put together a survey that y'all can fill out as we get closer to our C4 meeting. Brian, good chance maybe to put it in the chat where you can unpack a survey to inform what our retreat talks about. And I think that the 2025 transportation package is a great thing for us to discuss as a group. What are y'all in support of? Not just for Abernathy Bridge, but for everything. For how transportation will be funded into the future. What to do without a gas tax, what to do with a gas tax, what do you need locally, what do we need as a region? So there's a lot of questions that I think y'all can dive into at the upcoming retreat as well. And if we do that in the summer, that should give us plenty of time to work together to be in a good place to be at all the tables to say, look, we have community support around these ideas. So I think that's a really big piece to be thinking about. Put that on your calendars. Be thinking about how you want to talk about it. So it's kind of looking ahead at 2025. Transportation is going to be, in my mind, such a big deal. So will housing. I don't think that issue is going to go away. And housing infrastructure, that can be something that we think about. The governor just passed that housing bill with the support of the legislature. It's really a land use bill. And so I think there's a lot of things to think about locally, and we can talk about that too at the retreat or at other C4 meetings on how we are trying to grow in Clackamas County. How do we want to grow? Is it just Happy Valley that's growing? Or are there other cities that we want to grow? I think there's plenty of conversations for how to do it as a group rather than individually that will frame how we can support maybe transportation infrastructure. What is the big story around Sunrise? Is it just for Happy Valley? Is it also for Sandy? And if it's also for Sandy, how can we help them with their housing needs, which have a big, more kind of a moratorium, maybe not quite that word, but they are not able to build anymore until they solve their water problems. And so you've got to have a little bit of everything to make some of this function. And there's a lot of work to do. And we've got to make sure that we have space to do those pieces. And so I just threw a lot at you, kind of covered those 3 bullet points on your agenda, but I'm here for questions and strategy and helping you guys think about moving forward.
Awesome. Before that question, I just want to reiterate the fact that it's not just C4 members who are welcome to attend the C4 retreat. Other members of our councils are also able to attend. So if folks could relay that message to your colleagues, that would be great. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just want to put out there, I mentioned this morning, and Trent, I think you heard that as well this morning, and Mayor Milch and others who were there at our C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting. And that is that, and Trent, I think you said it, but I'll just say it from my perspective. I think that the funding question is probably going to be the biggest one for the 2025 package, is how we make up those gaps, whether it's the maintenance gap that people are passionate about, or whether it's going to be completing the projects and whatnot. But the other one I don't want to get left off is another product of HB 2017 was the legislative intent as it related to the STIF dollars, which was the transit dollars that were funded by the new employee tax intended to provide transit to them where they live versus where they work. The employer tax that historically is in place and been funding the substantial part of transit operations is based where the employer is. So as a more of a bedroom housing community, that being Clackamas, we have a lot of people who work all over the region, and therefore we generate a lot of that employee tax, and yet we have a lot of areas where those employees have zero access or limited access and then some. So that discussion about how the rules were reconfigured did not benefit us, and absent any adjustments in the near future with TriMet and our agencies on how we grapple with that, I think that needs to be perhaps one of the larger topics somehow at the retreat. That's just me. I'm just putting out my vote for transit and the funding question, and we're making good progress on housing. It's still going to be important, but I think the impacts to the city seem to be at a higher level, even though we do a lot on that at the county. But I'd like to hear from my city partners what they want to, what their gut tells them for C4 retreat agenda ideas.
Mayor Milch.
Well, I agree that the fact that Clackamas County is heavily residential and Washington County and some of the others are where more of the jobs are, if the housing was cheaper everywhere, you could tell people, if you want to work in Washington County, move to Washington County, and then you won't be on the freeway so much. But those issues do overlap to an extent, and we can't do that. I was pleased to hear Councilor Sherman report this morning from one of the other Metro-related committees working on locations of transfer stations for our, environmental things, that the choices between doing 4 or 5 really big ones spread all over the region, or a smaller number, more locally oriented, so that there's one of those other things where people wouldn't need to drive so much and it wouldn't involve so much transportation because it was in greater proximity to where people live. I began to notice, listening to some of the conversations in some of those transportation subcommittee hearings, that Nancy Nathanson at one meeting started talking about the relationship of land use and location and proximity. We had some great people who spoke up at that meeting in Wilsonville who lived in that Charbonnet neighborhood about having to always have to go over, use the freeway to get to anything. But, you want to know, the question you want to ask those people, did you make a conscious decision to live in a community that doesn't have a grocery store, doesn't have a library, doesn't have any of the rest of the important infrastructure to make your area livable? And now you want everybody else to solve the problem that you've created by living in that area. I don't want to, beat on those people for that, but you wonder where, what our legislators are going to be supportive of when it comes to people's choices about where they live and their distance from where they work and all the rest. So I think the land use issue is important. We're seeing more growth internally in Gladstone. We don't have room to expand, but we've got like 6 or 8 times the number of people requesting permits to do triplexes and duplexes and fourplexes on former single family lots that we had before. So whatever growth in housing we're going to do in Gladstone seems to be very internal, infill. But we sure need more jobs here, because even if they get a house here, they're still going to get on the freeway and drive somewhere else to work.
Great points, Mayor. Councilor Sherman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, and Mayor Milch, the waste information was really preliminary at this point. They weren't even able to tell us the differential in cost to go one direction versus another. So, but at least the data does lead them down a certain path. The conclusions, at least from their stakeholders, are this is what would be desired. My question, and this is kind of I guess it would be related to the our conference, would be, so do we, as I was thinking through kind of the presentation earlier and the results of information and the kind of the notion that people don't, maybe it's not that they don't like paying for things, but they want to know what they're paying for. And to me, that's always kind of the disconnect as we look at even the various possibilities for revenue sources, are effectively, how do we measure or communicate, okay, if we do these things, here's how it benefits you, the resident that lives in the county. We're going to recommend we increase gas tax by 2 cents, and the reason that we're going to do that is because it provides X number of millions of dollars to fix the potholes in those areas, to provide alternatives for transportation. So for me, it's always kind of, there's always that second part missing. We're always saying, hey, ODOT's behind in money, there's a fiscal cliff, there are all these things that are a problem, but we never say, and if we use these tools to raise the money, here's where it actually goes. So can we craft that as part of the discussion at our gathering? Or does that even make sense? Is it morally, we should just be, talking through the beginning and not the end of that? Thanks.
Oh, some quick reactions. The agenda is currently a blank slate. We can make our own discussion, and C4 can weigh into that, and maybe the survey that Brian provided can help inform some of those pieces. But funny you mentioned that, because last night I ran into the city manager for Tualatin, who was just touting the great work that they have been able to complete, like a 5-year transportation safety program. And I see Councilor Pratt here. Remember that several years ago, she also came to the retreat to talk about how they got that funded through a program. So I actually have been thinking about whether it would be appropriate to invite her back to talk about sort of capstoning. She once came to talk about how they got it funded and the community input that they did and how they're trying to communicate what they've done with the money. Seems to be right in line with what you're describing. That might be a way to think about that. But I would also say what I've been thinking about it for is, it can't just be 2025 can't just be a state, solve all the problems. There'll have to be local mechanisms that y'all need as well to trigger that more local authority. And that's why I'm thinking that type of conversation would be valuable, because it's both, and there's going to be work the state has to do, and there's going to be work that y'all may need to do locally in order to bring additional transportation projects, online, either in your city or in the county, et cetera. Politics will have to be part of that calculus too, but what are those mechanisms that are supportable? And I think that's where my mind's going right now to help frame a conversation like that. It's all very fresh, but when you described that, it reminded me of that conversation last night.
Well, and to your point, having local responsibility and local revenue opportunities as well to cover the costs of our areas. We were at City Council last night talking about this, how, our 2 cent gas tax generates $120,000, $130,000, $140,000 a year in revenue for our streets from one gas station. We have one gas station in Happy Valley, and that's it. So, and I didn't realize that we only had one bite at the apple on that one, and you can't just go out and change that local gas tax, because in my mind, we could raise $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of additional funding if we were able to control that. So how do we change rules like that to allow us to have more local opportunities for revenue generation that would literally be created in the city for city projects? So thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner.
Thank you. As far as discussions for the C4 retreat, I think some elements have come up just in this call. I think about how surprised everyone was to hear about the number of people who weren't aware of tolling altogether. And I also think about the reason why that is that people are busy and people only engage in issues once they really are impacted. And I think that the leaders need to communicate better and be more proactive with our engagements as far as including people in discussions. I think about the comment that was made about folks living in Charbonneau. You know, we've all become pretty reliant on our cars in our infrastructure that we've gotten used to using is, and we make assumptions that, well, if I'm living in a community, it's going to be always possible. So I think the people who moved to Charbonneau 30 or 40 years ago or whenever that was built weren't anticipating that a bridge would be told that they have to drive over every day. So those are the kind of, what points out to me is that we need to make long-term strategy discussions part of our regular routine with our communities. So we aren't having to react to something like a transportation infrastructure funding mechanism being approved at the state level that then gets implemented on the backs of community members as tolling was proposed to be, and the subsequent problems of diversion, et cetera. So I'd like to talk about long range planning and how to communicate that and what we want, you know, if we want more local in kind of self-contained communities. We have a lot of in Clackamas County, as was just pointed out, lots of residential, less commercial and industrial. And so maybe we need to think about those conversations.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thanks.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just want to just mention on this issue around funding, what people will pay for, what they won't pay for. You know, the way the legislature packaged HB 2017 was, you know, they showcased the projects, the bottlenecks, and did it in the guise of congestion and so forth, which is a real issue, right? And obviously the polling that we heard earlier demonstrated that as well. And then down below and at a lower level was the gas tax increase that was embedded in there. And if you read down the fine print, this ambiguous language around tolling, which people didn't really see, but the headline was the projects. So clearly there was no pushback on the total of 10 cents, you know, after full implementation of the gas tax. Not unlike what, you know, in a far bolder way, what Seattle area did when they put their transportation bond on there, and it was a bond, so it was all about the funding. It was a significant amount. I forgot what the dollar amount or the pennies were, but what the state of Washington is highly successful in doing is no matter where you go, there's always projects being constructed and people see their dollars at work, right? And granted, there's one project right now or two projects right now where people can see their dollars at work, but Abernathy Bridge and Highway 217. But I think what I've learned over all these years, people are willing to pay for something if they get value out of it. If you're just going to ask them for more money and not demonstrate any great value, that's a tough proposition any day of the week, anywhere you go.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Councilor Pratt.
I've heard the two things you mentioned are transportation bond, and I think the things that made that really successful were that we were a collaborative group, everybody agreed on it, and that there was a lot of communication out to the community. And so at the retreat, I'd like to see that we're talking about that as a group. I think that's why we were effective with the tolling thing, is we all work together. So like with transportation in particular, the other funding sources, like if we're looking at that and we can come to agreement and why, and that we communicate that. And what Commissioner Savas just said, if people, they don't understand how their tax revenues are used. So if we explain that and can make it clear how that will better the community and the roads, and we are part of that messaging, I think as a group, I think that will be a really effective use of our time.
Mayor, go ahead.
Thanks. Great discussion. I just wanted to remind everybody something that I've been telling folks lately is since the since the tolling hold for 205, and the cancellation of RMPP has happened, I'm sure you've all remember those spreadsheets that we were able to uncover with all the projected administrative costs of tolling, et cetera, and showing like $2 to $3.5 billion. I think it was like 2.8 to 3.5 billion spent to get the 400 million for the Abernathy Bridge, depending on the rate scenario. And the whole argument from ODOT was, hey, this is just for illustration only. We're going to have RMPP, so the costs will be spread out. So now that RMPP is dead, when we're focusing on this Abernathy Bridge funding question in 2025, remember those spreadsheets showing 40 to 48% admin is what we're looking at if they go with tolling there. And it's financially infeasible and inefficient, and like really not as good as, like, for example, finding alternative funding sources, or I don't know what kind of gas tax we're talking about, but say it's a 1 cent gas tax increase, which has a 0.3% overhead. So focusing on inefficiencies, I think, could be helpful going into 2025 of just tolling that one bridge, and how that's not really not financially responsible.
Right. Thank you for that point. And in addition to that, I'll just add that since the very beginning, throughout all of these conversations about tolling, we've been saying as a Clackamas County contingent that if it's going to happen, it needs to happen at a system level. And so now that the RMPP is being taken away, which is something that I think we can all be excited about, it still leaves us in a position where the only alternative now is something that we've been railing against, which is that it's not fair to just do one part of the system over the entirety. Now, granted, this conversation is a little different now that they've talked about scaling back the infrastructure improvements and only doing it around Abernathy, but this still brings us to one of our central tenets that we've all agreed to as jurisdictions, that it can't just be a small stretch, which would be unfair. Mr. Wilson.
Thanks. Thank you. All good input. I wanted to just, re-articulate too, why do we still meet here? And that's, yes, this project is delayed beyond the 2025 session, but there's still some things we have not heard clarity about related, as a result of the governor's letter. So we just want to flag that we still have not heard whether or not the supplemental EA will move forward this summer. And I think it's worth telling every one of you that I've been in touch with ODOT. I'm trying to reach out as often as we can just to confirm, do you know yet if you will proceed with that? When will you know? We heard as late as yesterday from Director Strickler that they do not know yet, that they are working to try to figure it out, and they hope to know within the next week or so. And so that we'll see. Remember that C4 has a letter to ODOT right now with a ticking clock on it for the end of the month about will they do an extension on the comment period for the EA. And so now it's kind of two questions. Will you still do the EA? And if so, what will you do the comment, period extension? So I probably took it upon myself to say, like, if you're not going to move forward with the EA, I don't think you need to reply to this letter. That'll be sufficient. But we still are expecting a reply by the end of the month, one way or the other. And so we'll wait to hear more from them on that. But that's still lingering out there. And hopefully we'll know more soon. And of course, I'm sure they'll tell everybody at the same time through something, but we'll make sure to share it if we don't see it more massively communicated.
Mayor Bielostowski.
Sorry, just to respond, and I've been, I don't like to pour salt in a wound, but I've been talking a little bit lately about the governor's letter and how it said in there, stop all expenditures on the implementation of tolling I-205 until legislature has chance to weigh in. Now, if they move forward with this EA, you're talking about millions of dollars of additional expenditures, and that's contravening directly the governor's direction. And so just keep that in your heads, folks, that we may have to call it out if needed. I'm not saying do it now, but it would be at the OTC meeting, it was said that, well, we won't be spending tens of millions more dollars, or won't be millions of dollars. It's like, the direction was to stop all expenditures. So keep that in mind.
Right.
He walked that back, didn't he?
Is there any further discussion? All right. Oh, I see in the chat. Mayor Bielosowski, if you have an answer to that in the chat.
Oh, how's it been shared? It was shared in a press release that went out with a link to the results. It's on the city website. We have the final report that was presented today. That was is we still got to make a couple quick changes with the additions of some of Oregon City, for example, onto that document. DHM's got to do that, and then that can be shared in any format that we'd like. And we have a 2-page memo from DHM as well that I took down to the legislature and gave to some of the legislators who've been involved in the discussion. So however we feel fit to share, it can be shared. It's public. So we could talk about that as a group too at some point.
Awesome. Thank you for oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Adam, to your question, or maybe it was Trent's question about whether or not this group continues to meet. Until there's a clear answer, I suggest that we continue our work. And I'm not going to take my foot off the gas on this. And but if there's a clear signal or a clear decision being made that all tolling along I-205 is canceled, I think we don't have any other choice. And again, we already heard it. We had the EA is still on the books to come out in July or June or July. So we have work to do if that's the case. So if we don't need to meet, we don't necessarily have to schedule a meeting, but that doesn't mean we have to disband either. So
agreed. So thank you everyone for the discussion today. Please make sure to fill out the survey for the C4 retreat and tell your colleagues. Again, thank you. It was good to see you all, and seeing no further discussion, we are adjourned.